Welcome to the Scott Homa Podcast, Formula One Cars Go Fast edition of the show. The show usually about your Houston Cougars. I think we like to about once a summer, every other summer, I think is actually the clip we were going at last summer with the Big 12 move. Was a little newsy. And I think the three of us, you'll hear who the three, if you are watching the show, you know is a different three, although a somewhat familiar face joining us here. But the three of us, I think when we did the last show, kind of generally believed we would do another one of these. We did it during the season 7 summer, but that it would be kind of an every other year affair. So boom, it's every other year. Our second Formula One podcast here. If you're just like, how dare you talk about something other than the Houston Cougars or Houston Cougar adjacent things? I have great news for you right now. In your feed are 2 episodes from the past 8 or 9 days about still fairly newsy topics, as well as our 7th annual Paw Score Awards, where we recapped the 2023-24 athletics year and all the really high points, student athletes, coaches, games, moments, all that good stuff. So if you're just like, cars going fast around a track, not my thing, glad it's your thing, not my thing. I don't begrudge it of you, but I really enjoy talking about Formula One with 2 of my very good friends, one of whom is a regular co-host of the show with me, one of whom is a very good longtime friend of Bobby and myself, a second time on the podcast, many years past that, friend Bobby. I'm sorry not to give you the VIP treatment here.
It happens. I'm always second, bud. I'm always second.
I mean, you're about to be, spoiler, if
you have
our last
no choice.
Episode, it is about to have no choice but to pass it off to you at some point. Dustin will be, and if you haven't listened to it, Dustin is going to be actually retiring from the podcast to manage the social media accounts of the Corn Palace in Mitchell, South Dakota, a palace made entirely of corn. So obviously it's taking Dustin's time. If you want to congratulate Dustin on this, please tweet at him at Scott and Holman on Twitter with corn emojis. I have talked for too long and not made a lot of sense in most of it. Bill, our graphic designer, our good friend, the longest Formula One fan of the 3 of us here. How are you doing on this Thursday night, my good friend?
Man, I'm stoked to be here. Do you think Dustin's going to have Dave Matthews Band on a loop, or is it going to be Nickelback in the Corn Palace?
Honestly, I had my 2 ideas, because I did not plan this out. I do not have notes on this. It was like my 2 paths of what story I might make up about why Dustin is stepping away from regular weekly hosting duties. It was Dustin was going to follow Dave Matthews Band tour, and if you wanted to see him to go to the Gorge concert over Labor Day weekend and watch it, because Dustin will be there front and center with all the other Dave heads. Went with the Corn Palace one, which I think is funnier, but will probably make him less mad. So that's what we went with there. That was my thought process.
No, I'm absolutely stoked to be here. I appreciate y'all having me back. I've been looking forward to this for 2 years, and really looking forward to getting into it. Bobby, how you doing, man?
Buddy, I'm great. I am. It is a Thursday. Today is basically my Monday, so I could be better, but yeah, there you go. Count it on your fingers. But overall, things going well. Super excited to talk F1. You guys are my F1 buddies. And yeah, Dustin leaves, and we're like, hey, why don't we just talk about cars going fast?
I mean, we did it while he was a regular co-host of the show too.
We should just do that, and then you'll slowly start to see more F1 talk. We may even talk like World Rally Championships. Like, we're gonna slowly, now that Dustin's gone, this is me coming in and sneaking in and just being like, hey, here's my influence.
You just gotta stop before you get to the super stadium trucks and Formula SAE.
Yeah.
Although I think U of H has a Formula SAE team.
And I'm pretty sure Sam went to Monster Jam like a couple of weeks ago, so we can.
His tickets still just $5.
We can make that work. We can make that work. Sam can. We'll start having our weekly Monster Jam sessions, and we can go from there.
Grave. I was gonna say it's gonna be like that. The frog. Yeah, that principle of like the frog doesn't notice the pot's boiling. Like our regular listeners, you're gonna not even notice the transition from U of H football to. Me and you complaining about Formula E's like rule structure. Like, why can't they just make it like Formula with electric cars? Okay. Before this turns into 90 minutes of us goofing around, I will say, kind of start us talking on this topic. Of course, mention the top here, our friends at Charlie Hustle. Please, like you see in this graphic created by this guy right under me, this fantastic graphic. Not me. I I could barely turn the computer on, me and my MIS degree. But this guy creates awesome graphics for the show, including the one that if you were watching the show, well, I mean, if you were even listening to the podcast, if you were looking at the street sign logo, that's 100% this guy directly below me on this podcast made Bill. So I wanted to shout you out there before we got into that. The main topic of the show, please go to charliehustle.com. Like I was saying at the top, use our promo code PAWD15 to save 15% on an incredible collection of Cougar wearables. I think that's all the introductions, guys, all the housekeeping. You want to get into the Vroomy cars that go fast?
Let's do it, boys.
Cargo Burr. I'm all about it.
Heck yeah. If you are new to Formula One, I think we did a decent explainer, episode 757. If you go way back in your feed of Formula One, we're not going to do that tonight. If you want to just like feel like you're casually following along, 10 teams, 20 cars, 2 drivers. They race about it's 24 times this year, right, guys?
Longest. That's correct.
It's 24. Yeah, it is 24 because it's the longest calendar
season ever
in like 70 years.
Certainly something Formula One has not taken pains to point out every broadcast that you watch. But 24 races, 20 cars. They go fast. They do a lot of interesting locales, and that's basically all I went into it in terms of a knowledge base. Oh, and if you want like the personality stuff, I know Bill. I'm sorry, as a more purist tenured fan, watch Drive to Survive. It's propaganda, but it's very well done propaganda and introduces you to some very interesting and also very hateable characters from the formula. You get an idea of who's who from that. Like, is it biased like propaganda? Yes, it is very well done though. I would put it up there in the pantheon of sports docs out there if you want to kind of get caught up in Formula One. So with that acknowledged, guys, let's talk about the season so far. A season that 1 week in, I think, Bobby, your message to the two of us in our group chat that often, but not always, but often goes around the topic of Formula One was, gentlemen, I am whelmed. Like the under, you're just like, basically not, and I think justifiably so, not very optimistic. Max Verstappen, who won all but one race of the prior season, won pretty comfortably. And it was just like, oh boy, we got another one of these. We have to be like, no, it's exciting. Like third through eighth was a real slobber knocker. Max Verstappen won by a half minute, but it was really exciting, seeing Ferrari and Mercedes would finish second at the end of the year or something like that. It's gone from that to being like, oh God, like this season might be as terrible as the one before it to, I would say, an extremely exciting one. Like I think is that correct as a general assessment, Bill? Like a broad assessment of 24 so far?
My favorite season of the, I started watching in 2013 after I watched Seb Vettel on Top Gear, and realized, hey, wait a minute, I got cable now. I can watch this. Let's go watch this. So I got into it, but this is easily my favorite, the most exciting season I've watched.
Yeah, because 21 was exciting, but it felt like more of a 2-team battle. It's like, okay, like 2 of these teams have their shit together. And this one, it's like 4, very occasionally 5 or 6 have their shit together. I think that's kind of
the top half of the grid always has a puncher's chance.
Yep. Bobby, what I was going to say, so I'm going to start this off. We're going to do 3 discussion questions about this season. I'm going to throw to you to start. Okay. Bill, you jump in after Bobby. This one, I'm going to start you off on the next question here. Bobby, I thought this would be a good one to start the discussion, mainly because I think there are a number of correct answers to this question. There's, I think, 1 or 2 which I feel like would be the betting odds favorite to be the answer from one or both of us here. But what's been your favorite race of the current season?
So, as a Lando Norris fan, which we'll get into later, you would think that my answer would be Miami when he won his first race. But my favorite race every single year is Silverstone, the British Grand Prix. It's so good every single year. The track is built for racing, so you don't have a street circuit where everything's super tight. There's lots of action on the track from 1 to 20. You had Lewis Hamilton winning, which was kind of unexpected, right? We knew that Mercedes was going to be pretty good, but this was pretty much the start of Mercedes kind of coming back. Lewis winning his home Grand Prix, just really exciting racing every single year at Silverstone, which is where the British Grand Prix takes place. This year was no different. You had some excellent strategies that were being discussed. You got a lot of action, not just on the track, but in the pits, in the strategies, the different tires that they chose from. So for me, I always look forward to the British Grand Prix, but this year it was really, really special. It felt like it was a really good race. And so far, it's been my favorite one.
I mean, nothing you said there's wrong. Nothing. Not a word of it. But God, and Formula One is very British centric in terms of the media apparatus. Like the kind of the same way that you'd probably, NFL or NBA is still going to be American centric, even though they are world popular games. And for legit reasons, and I'll let you give your thoughts on this, but God, the British media is so up its own ass about Silverstone. Well, justified. It's a good track. Nothing you said was incorrect there, but God, they're up their own ass about Silverstone.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, they go.
They're like a race at Silverstone.
Yeah, and
Cops corner.
Yeah, cops. Whatever it is, like Beckett's and the Hamilton straight now, but like. You are exactly right. And our feed here in the States is the British Sky Sports feed, right? We don't have the world feed or anything like that. So it's definitely very British centric. Whenever they talk about Silverstone, they always talk about and through goes Hamilton, where Lewis Hamilton passed two guys at once. And they act like it's this like incredible moment where Lewis Hamilton passed two guys at once. And Lewis Hamilton finished like fourth in that race. Like it wasn't even, but like they talk about it because it was like this great moment that no one will ever forget. And they're like, what an iconic moment. And you're very much right. You're very much right. Like they are very much up their own ass about how great Silverstone is, but they're actually right. It really is the best track in terms of racing and all that. It really is the best track. It's a banger every single year.
See, I understand where you're coming from. Silverstone is a great track. It's a great race. I used to feel the same way about Monaco, and then the cars just kept getting bigger and bigger, and there's no room to pass. There's nowhere to get around anybody. And so I've found myself sort of a free agent. And this year I landed on Canada. Canada was an absolutely
Canada was a good race.
Amazing race. Instant classic. I mean, it started with rain, and then it didn't rain, and then it was going to rain some more. So changing conditions, there was action all up and down the grid. K-Mag got on an early stormer, dragged his Haas all the way up to like fifth, I think. And then he
was going on wet tires, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he went out on full wets, and everybody else was on inters, and it was the right call. They nailed that, and then they completely bungled the pit stop and dropped him back down like 10 places or something. There was a tight three-way battle for first, before, during, and after the customary safety car. And there was, speaking of that Hamilton pass, Albon did the same thing. He got past Ricciardo and Ocon and just absolutely just threaded the needle through a chicane. It was beautiful. And then, speaking of Brits being up their own ass, we had Norris, we had Hamilton, we had Russell in second through fourth, covered by 1.2 seconds. It was a great race.
Yeah, a lot of right answers. Those are two very good ones. I'm not surprised anyone that right now on F1's website, the British Grand Prix is the top vote getter. No, I'm sure no geographic bias in that, but Canada, I expect it to be at least
35 times himself.
Yeah, right. I knew Canada would be one of the answers. I figured Britain was as well. I love that we have three different answers to this. Again, came to completely organically. My answers is the Austrian Grand Prix, because for me, that race was the exact point where I let myself believe that this season was going to be one where a team not named Red Bull and drivers not named Max Verstappen would actually compete for wins. This would actually be a season where you went into a weekend not being like, okay, but how much is Max Verstappen going to win by? How much drama is there going to be before Max Verstappen is crowned the winner of this race? You had that absolute classic battle at the front between Verstappen and Lando Norris fighting for the win, something we really hadn't seen much between the end of the 21 season and this current one. You have both guys pit on lap 52. I just remember watching the race on a slight recorded delay, because cut me some slack. A lot of these start at like 6 a.m. my time, and waking up at 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. or even 7 sometimes on a Sunday and being like, okay, I'm going to put on a race, could be a little bit of a non-starter here. Watched a bit of a delay. I remember both guys pit on lap 52, and I'm not doing the half watch, half play on my phone like some races, honestly, I did this year thing. Yeah. I was 100% locked in. The battle those guys were having, finally on lap 64, Norris puts on, I think, a move that should have passed Verstappen. Verstappen, classic him, way too aggressive action, prevent it. Both guys sustain damage to their car, have to go back to the pit. George Russell kind of wins out of nowhere after being pretty, I think, far behind in third place while those two guys fought in front of him. To me, that sequence, the last before it, the sequence itself is what I would show to somebody who's at least somewhat of a sports fan, somebody at least F1 curious about why I find this sport so compelling. The drama with these absurd cars, these drivers, in Verstappen's case, these driver egos, like all that stuff I think is incredibly compelling sports. That was my pick. I really love that we landed on 3 different races.
Absolutely. I think all 3 answers really good answers, right? Yeah. I can hear an argument on all 3 of those. And to be honest, I kind of forgot about Austria because my boy was the one who had to take the L on that. That was a really good race. Yeah. So really hard for me to argue that one. Canada was great with the weather, all of that. So I think all 3 options really, really good options.
Canada planted the seed for me, Bill, of like believing that this might be a compelling season. Sorry.
No, absolutely. You're dead on. I had kind of an inkling of that in Miami, and actually in Australia. Verstappen was way out ahead until his engine caught fire, but that was when I was like, okay, we haven't seen a technical DNF from a Red Bull in ages. They are under pressure.
Yeah.
You could see them being under pressure. You could see it again in Miami. Verstappen had to work to get second.
Yep.
And he finally seems to have found a playing field that he can't just cruise through on autopilot. He's actually having to race, and it's showing up. That's why he had that collision with Norris. He was it's the word I'm looking for here. He was flustered, and he died at Norris because he couldn't figure out what else to do. That was the exact moment I knew that this season was going to be different. It was going to be exciting. There was going to be a real battle.
Yep. So next discussion point here, acknowledging that there is a good chunk of the current season left. There could be a number of incredibly compelling things that happen after we record this F1 Summer Break podcast. Bill, I'm going to start you with this one. What moment from this season, everything that's happened so far, is the one that's going to really, you think years from now, stick out in your mind when you look back on this specific season? I mean, for me, the 21 season, I know you had, obviously the way the final race ended, I guess that would probably be a right answer to this too. But for me, that Hamilton Verstappen crash where Verstappen goes like 30 G's into the wall. No, it's Silverstone.
You're thinking Silverstone. I was thinking Monza where Verstappen landed on top of Hamilton.
Another right answer to that question.
Yeah.
But pick one. What moment from this season do you think in a few years would be like, oh yeah, that was crazy. Like I just go to you and I'm like, 2024 F1 season, go. And your word association is what and why?
Word association, Lando's maiden win at Miami. Mm-hmm. Just to see him finally break the no-win curse, to see him put the screws to Verstappen. Like I said, that was kind of where I saw the first glimmers of, okay, we might have a battle here. It may only be a two-horse battle like it was in the Red Bull versus Mercedes days, but we may have something here. And to see him get his maiden win, awesome. And my close second, but for a very different reason, was actually Piastri getting his maiden win. Just to watch him go, thanks, guys. Great race. Dude, you just got your first win in Formula One, something you've been working towards your entire life. And all you have to say is, thanks, guys, because of the way it worked out. I mean, I get it, but at the same time, maybe, sometimes the strategy goes your way, sometimes it doesn't, and it just seems kind of a strange reaction. So to see McLaren drivers both get their maiden wins, I'm all about it for this season.
Piastri is a very deadpan guy, though.
Yeah.
Like, he is. There are some people who are just like, they're just like, and not really many. I can't think of many Formula One drivers. I think Verstappen can be at times, but like Piastri, like very deadpan, very and that kind of probably an asset that you are not somebody who gets flustered easily when your job is like driving in a little tube at 200 miles per hour around technically difficult tracks in this car that's like engineered like a rocket ship.
That's fair. I mean, I think of Verstappen as being almost bored in his interviews sometimes. That hasn't shown up this year. Again, he's feeling pressure, but I don't know. Piastri, even George feels like he's pretty steady Eddie. But his first win, he had a little cheer for himself. He clapped in the cockpit and everything. He was excited. I mean, I would have figured Piastri would have been excited for his first win.
I think George is a little bit different though, just because George had been on the grid for 5 years and he didn't have his win, and then he finally got it.
Oscar didn't have 3 years of driving the shittiest car imaginable.
Yeah, he got the jump into a car that struggled a little bit last year, and then I'll talk about this later, but then suddenly came in and he was suddenly in the top 5 pretty easily, and so I think it's a little bit different than somebody like a George or something like that. So
Bob, that's your answer to this.
Yeah. Oh, my answer is not just the singular moment of Lando winning his championship, but it's the moment inside the race that allowed him to win that championship. That safety car where he kind of just got lucky on when the safety car came out. And then if you actually kind of look at the radio comms and things like that, he kind of slowed down, but the safety car didn't catch him. And it was very kind of weird and fluky. And so you'll just remember that his first win was this weird safety car kind of thing that
people were like, pick him up to like 15 cars.
It was very weird. And he had a big lead, and then the safety car came out and he was able to pit, but he shouldn't have been. But then if you really want to talk about it, the next race, Lando got screwed by the safety car. Lando got the bad break of the safety car. So maybe Lando gets his first win and people were saying, oh, it's because he got lucky with the safety car. But then the next week or the next race, I can't remember if there was 2 weeks between the race, but the next race, he got screwed by the safety car. He didn't get the luck of the safety car. And next thing you know, Lando Norris is finishing like 2nd or 3rd in that race, I believe. So it's very crazy how things work like that. It's very much the butterfly effect of F1. So I remember the safety car, and I remember being, because I'm a Lando fan, right? No qualms about that. Big Lando Norris fan. The first race I watched is one of his most iconic moments. Just a really cool, just a driver. He's kind of an asshole if we're being honest. Like seems like a young douchebag, but like the first race I watched was kind of the best
that's
moment.
Like 75% of these guys. Come on.
I was going to say,
that is
who
correct.
are we talking about now?
Right. So like the best moment my favorite F1 moment is the first race I watched, and Lando Norris did that. So I'm a huge fan. So
Scenario 7 is your number one moment?
Oh, it's the best moment, and it's not even close to me because it was his maiden podium. He had to make up like a 2.5 seconds in that lap, and he just absolutely destroyed it. It was amazing. Just an incredible lap. And just if you've ever listened to the radio comms of that lap, it's pretty much he's dead silent. They tell him scenario 7. He turns the engine settings up. He goes, and you just hear his engineer going, you want to use energy here? Save energy here. Deploy energy. We did it! And like, it just blows up. It's an amazing 1.5 minutes that I think anyone who even kind of wants to watch F1 does. So back to the thing at hand, the safety car. I remember the safety car came out and I stood up and I was like, he's going to do it. He's going to win. And then everything worked out. I was like, let's go. So it was just super exciting. Just a great moment for me. The safety car, as weird as that sounds, that a safety car could kind of come out, because I remember it came out and my initial reaction was panic, because I was like, shit, he's going to have to he's may not get the benefit, and everyone's going to bunch up because he had like a 30-second lead at that point. And it was like he was going to coast, and then he didn't get the coast. And so that is the moment for me where I went high, low, and then he won, and it was just super high.
So, Sam, what about you?
Yeah, for 2 reasons. One of them, which I think will be pretty obvious. One, which I think might be a little bit less so. The Hungarian Grand Prix, which is now 2 weeks ago, just for 2 really newsworthy, kind of bizarre moments. I think the one that you guys okay, you know what I'm talking about here. McLaren, the team Bobby just got done talking about, basically had to beg Lando Norris, the driver Bobby was just talking about, to let his teammate get past, because just a strategy thing, and really
they screwed up the strategy.
Yeah, they did.
Pitwall
Like,
screwed up the strategy.
yeah, like the long story short, we won't get into the really, I guess, in the weeds on it, but like Oscar Piastri should have been in, like, it was a team fuck up that Oscar Piastri wasn't in the lead here. And it was like 4 to 5, maybe longer laps of Lando's race engineer, who's his like main contact, like basically the guy talking to the driver, being like,
where you need the team, and right now the team needs you, or whatever.
Like, remember what we talked, and usually it's just like, okay, this strategy, it's like half decipherable, like do this, energy mode, this, whatever. It's like, remember our meetings every Sunday as a team. I know you'll do the right thing. Just like the kind of emotional conversation you don't hear usually between a race engineer and a guy, going in this car a bajillion miles per hour. Like it was very memorable. It was a very weird moment. And like, it's weird to think of like McLaren, this team that has been just for so long being like, oh, this might be the year, like to have the by far best car of the weekend and then have like the main story be like, ooh, wasn't it kind of weird how they just had to like beg their senior, only guy who has a conceivable chance of winning the individual championship to not win the race. It was just that moment. But also I think the one that I think gets overlooked, it was the way Max Verstappen basically spent the entire race just like complaining about how fucked his car is and in sort of typical fashion, being really mad about it. And if you look back, I think like we will on the moment that this supremely dominant era for Red Bull ended, or just like it was so clear that it was going to end, that they were not going to have a car good enough to just win most of the races and not just be a runaway to win both titles. I think this was the moment that was just unmistakable that this season will not be like the last two. They might get one or both of these titles, but it is going to be a fight for both championships. And the way, honestly, his team kind of seemed sick of his shit. I mean, he's a 3-time world champion. They're going to put up with a lot more and a lot worse to keep this guy on the team, which I think is feeling like more of a question by the month. But for me, like that, the McLaren moment, and also just the way it really felt like Red Bull was starting to publicly crumble as a team that's just going to like win every race and be the dominant team of this era. Like, I think that race for me, I think for those two reasons, like you ask me, I'm just like, oh yeah, this race. There's a lot of memorable moments. We answered 3 questions, or we answered 3 different ways that I think are 3 different correct answers. But that for me, it was 2 races ago.
Yep.
All right. So
I can totally see that.
Yep. Our last discussion question, I did not reveal this to either of you before the show, but one I don't think requires the usual pre-show prep, given the knowledge base that we all have on the show. I'm going to throw it to you, Bill, again at the start. We're now just over halfway through the 2024 season. I love that this is actually a conceivable question I can ask you, because last year it's sort of like, dumb question, Sam. Next. Who do you think wins the individual driver championship? Who wins the team constructors championship, and why? Without any kind of like, oh, I got to look at like where this team is in the standings, what races are coming up, just your gut reaction.
So I know that there's still a vast gulf in points between Verstappen and Norris. It's something like 120, 160 points or something.
I'll cheat you. It is actually 78 right now, but
is that all it is?
It is 78 right this moment.
Okay, well that's overcomable. That's totally doable. I'm gonna go with my heart and say I think Norris takes it, and I think McLaren takes the drivers' championship. I don't think Checo has enough in him to support
constructors. You mean?
Yeah, constructors. I don't think Checo has enough in him to support Verstappen, and this year they'll need him because Verstappen can't win it by himself in 24 like he could in 23. So I'm going all in Norris and McLaren.
I jumped the gun a bit there, Bobby.
It's absolutely going to be Max Verstappen. If that is, so it's 77 points.
78.
I think 78 points. We're probably halfway through the season, if I had to guess.
Yeah, we're in the break right now. So
yeah. So how many? I mean, that would mean
10 races left.
10 races left. That would mean that
I'll give you guys those 2 numbers.
Lando could win every race. Max would finish second, and that would mean Max would be the champion by 8 points because there's a 7-point difference.
Is it 1 point or 2? Either way, it's close enough for me that there's.
It would be 8 points because he's up by 78. There's 10 races left. There's 7 points separating first and second.
Yeah.
Lando.
But do you think he's getting second every race?
Do I think Max is?
That's true. Lando's not
This
winning
is-
every race.
This is
so.
assuming Lando's winning every race.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
think
right, that's
Lando's
right.
winning every race. So
To be
Lando's
fair, though, Max already has a retirement and a fourth, 2 fifths, and a sixth. So
yeah, but so does Lando, right? Like Lando's doing
That's fair.
fine, but Lando's not winning every race. So I don't see Lando winning every race and Max suddenly becoming. I don't see that Red Bull with Max in it as suddenly the fourth best car. Like it's just not. Like Max still did pretty well this week despite a 10-place grid penalty. He passed the Ferraris with, if I recall, he didn't.
Yeah, he
not
took
that
fourth.
he passed them with ease. Yeah, he took fourth and he started what 11th, 12th,
11th on the grid, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, he's still got a really good car. He's still Max effing Verstappen in that Red Bull. Earlier in the season, what did I say? I was whelmed. So I'm going Max Verstappen, but I will say that McLaren takes the Constructors' Championship. Sam?
Yeah, I think that's my pick too. Like I love that it's enough of a conceivable question that we even ask it. But
Yeah.
I think and the great thing about the season, it's not as if McLaren's probably the best car, but they're not going to win every race. Like they'd be lucky to get 4 of the next 10, honestly, just given that Max Verstappen still drives for Red Bull, given that Mercedes is now like a race winning car, given that probably not, but Ferrari's good enough to get on the podium and maybe, might get lucky one weekend and win a race or something like that, or do some development thing that actually gets them back to being a regular race winning car like they were early in the season. So I like you said, Bill, I don't think Checo Perez, who don't worry, he's going to be a discussion topic of this show a little bit later. I don't think he's good enough to get Red Bull across the line for the team title. And I think they're going to rue the fact that they didn't at least try something different here with a meaningful chunk of the season left to go, not just kick the can down the road. But his Mexican Red Bull can and t-shirt sales are so good, which they are, but he's not going to be able to get a team title. But I think Max Verstappen is still able to do good enough week in, week out to keep a 30-40 point buffer when it's all said and done by the end of the season.
I think it's going to be that far apart, 30-40 points at the end.
Norris hasn't been winning it. Norris hasn't been winning them. Like the McLaren's been good enough, but I don't believe Lando can. I think he has another win or two in him this season. I don't think he has more than another win or two in him this season. I think McLaren has more than another win or two this season in them, but
McLaren has shown this season that they have the car. Now they need the culture of winning. They need to tighten up their strategies. They need to tighten up their how the drivers are interacting with each other. They're gonna have to choose a number one driver pretty soon. I think we all agree that it's probably Lando Norris, but Oscar Piastri is not gonna be thrilled with that, right?
No, he's too good of a driver to just be like, oh yeah, I'll be the number two. Like
exactly. So it's gonna really. They need to. Now they've reached a point where they can contend. They're going to win races, but they're going to have to figure out the small margins that make good teams great. They're going to have to do the thing that Mercedes did that made them great. They had the car, Mercedes had the car, but then once they figured out Bottas and how Lewis how Lewis and Terry would work together, I think they that's when they really took the next step and just absolutely had Lewis on it, and there was no doubt Mercedes was going to win.
To what you said just now, Bill, but I wasn't around for this part of F1. Norris Piastri almost feels like Rosberg Hamilton to me. Like there's they're both too good of a driver to be like okay being second fiddle.
Exactly.
Is that a good comp? I didn't watch F1. I know the history, but I didn't watch it then. Is that a good comp or a decent comp?
I would say it's a decent comp. I think the difference is Rosberg was there first. He was actually there with Schumacher before Hamilton came in.
That's right.
And that was the year after. So Braun GP that rebranded after Honda folded and all of that. They picked up. I think Rosberg might have even been there with Button for Braun, and Button won it in their 1 year. But then I think this is a better comp for Schumacher, Rosberg. Lewis is just on another level, especially back then. He just, like we were saying before the show, he got here on merit. He didn't get here on merit plus buckets of cash. He got here on straight up, I can drive this thing. And I think the difference is that we've got, if you want to, you could even say that we've got like a Rosberg-Bottas pairing at McLaren right now. They're both stellar drivers, but they are both one step behind the Schumachers, Vettels, Verstappens of the world, Hamiltons. I and to your point, Bobby, earlier about the point differential, I don't know, the Mercedes is strong enough and the Ferraris are strong enough. I could see them stealing a win or two, and that would mean that the points difference would be less between Verstappen and whichever McLaren. So maybe you're right. Maybe it is a wider gap than I was giving them credit for. I think just excited to see Lando do well.
Oh,
the heart wants what the heart wants.
Absolutely.
All right, so we're going to check in on the 10 teams, 10 constructors, I guess, that make up Formula One. I am stealing Ken Pomeroy's tears of joy here. I think
bringing it back to basketball. Let's go. That's what we do
here
on the Scott Holman podcast.
All things come back to men's basketball here. The three of us, because it's uneven, we gave Bill, our good friend and guest here, 4 teams to split the 10 up evenly as we can between the three of us. And so my tiers for this one are front of the pack, basically the 4 teams that have had one or both their drivers win a race in the current season, who more often than not make up the top finishing cars every race weekend. Interesting midfield teams, the 3 teams who have a good car or good enough car that one of their drivers finish in the top 10 isn't a major surprise, but also not teams that will likely come close to having a driver win a race this season, will be probably extremely fortunate to even get a driver in the top 3 on the podium. And the back markers, the 3 teams that are generally making up the lowest place finishers, a team where a top 10 performance is very notable. In one team's case, has not happened in a single race in this current season. So
I just want to say just real quick, I love the tiers, but one of the most, just for new fans, if you see those back marker teams and you're like, why would anyone care about those? That's probably where some of the most interesting stuff happens on 100%. Race day, is those back 3 teams and who do they beat and things like that.
No. And like those teams are more likely to try wild shit. Like,
yeah.
Look, if you love an underdog, you cheer for a back marker.
Yeah, which
maybe
putting their driver on full wets, and that driver gets to the top 5, as we discussed earlier. And you're like, what just happened? Oh my god! So
what am I? They go, oh, right, we forgot we're Haas. We're gonna go and bungle the pit stop. And
but that's where you'll see a lot of really cool stuff and wild shit happen.
I was gonna say, like, I believe this was Miami 2022, right? So one of the teams that is a current back marker kind of has bounced, between like, maybe they're like a decent team and back marker. Williams, longtime legacy Formula One team, had their driver, you're required to pit once. They had their driver stay on the same set of tires for the entire race until the last lap, until they built up a big enough lead that they can put him in the pit lane, change his tires, and he'd still be out there in the top 10 places. I believe it was Alex Albon, and I can't remember what race it was.
And there were people in the pits, and he was like, I'm going to murder somebody if they don't get out of my way on
that wasn't it? It might have been Miami. I feel like it was involved with that somehow too.
Yeah, it was a 2022 race, but that kind of wild stuff is what Bobby's talking about.
Yeah. So sorry, we can go through the 10 constructors now, but I just wanted to kind of point out, like, they're really fun to watch. Like, we often find ourselves texting each other, especially before this year, texting each other about crazy stuff that happened in the back half of the field. So sorry, go ahead.
No, I think that's really understanding and enjoying the sport is obviously, like I said in the last segment, the 2 guys fighting for win is really cool. Like, it is cool that is happening again in the sport, because it decidedly did not happen the 2 seasons before this one very often.
It barely happened for the last decade, guys.
Like guys, like 2 hungry men fighting over the last slice of bread. Like two of these backmark teams fighting for the 10th place to get the last point. Like, that is very important to that team. Like, it's a real thing.
It's worth millions
to stop somebody else getting that point.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we're at 16th, but we're gonna put a guy out there to take fastest lap from another team that I'm fighting for the last slice of bread with.
Yeah.
All right.
It's great.
We're going to do this in order of the current standings, 1 through 10. We're going to start with the team that's currently at break time here, occupying first place. That is the Red Bull Racing team with 408. team points, current leader, as I said, of the Constructors' Championship, also the team of the current Drivers' Championship leader, Max Verstappen. But like we've talked about already, unlike the last 2 seasons where this team largely dominated, it really dominated the last 2/3 of the season where we last talked about it, 2022, and we were kind of like in the middle of being like, oh, looks like Red Bull's kind of got this thing figured out. And last season where they won literally all but one of the races, either Verstappen or his fellow driver, Sergio Perez, Red Bull does not look close to a sure thing this year to win the team title. At worst, it looks like Verstappen's going to have to at least sweat out the driver's title more than we expected, and the team is certainly going to have to sweat out the team championship. You also have a bunch of external stuff that's happened since we last talked about this team. Goes back to, I really think it all goes back to, if you want to kind of do the arrows, their gazillionaire founder, Dieter Mateschitz, passing away in October of 22. And you've kind of gradually seen the cracks form over time as the company Red Bull, and obviously the team divided among those factions, people that run the company. You know, you have the Thai people who were originally part of it that Mateschitz got the idea for Red Bull from. You have his heirs. You have people who are in kind of in the faction of both of those groups that are trying to run Red Bull. Their team principal, their team head, Christian Horner, spent most of the late offseason having to answer questions about really not great allegations of inappropriate behavior with a female Red Bull employee. Max Verstappen's father and former F1 driver, another real piece of work himself, Jos Verstappen, lobbed a lot of public criticism at Horner, making the situation, if possible, even more awkward. I think leading to pretty consistent chatter that the Verstappen family as a whole might leave Red Bull entirely, something that would have, I think, seemed unthinkable like 12 months ago.
Yeah.
Red Bull's legendary technical guy, chief technical officer, Adrian Newey, probably the greatest car designer in F1 history, is in the process of leaving the team, will be leaving the team after the season. You have the usual brain drain that you see with successful sports organizations where other teams want to hire your key personnel to bigger salaries or bigger responsibility positions. Your assistant gets the head job somewhere, all that kind of stuff. But you also have like Newey leaving. You have longtime sporting director Jonathan Wheatley, who will be taking the team principal job of the new Audi project at the end of the season, had been with the team basically all their Formula One existence, like Adrian Newey. So, you know, like I said, successful organizations will always be the target of less successful ones who are offered bigger roles and bigger salary to your staff. But losing 2 senior people who've been with the team for decades in the context of all the other stuff that's going on around your team, all signs point to a team right on the verge of a major step back, a team whose bubble is about to burst. I think the more immediate problem, the car is still one of the better ones, still incapable of winning a race, but it's no longer winning every race. And even with a truly elite driver like Verstappen in the car, so they can basically only count on one driver right now to score the points needed to win a team championship. He can probably hold on to the lead, like we said at the last segment, but I don't know. And they've also been really weird and indecisive about what to do with the number 2 driver, Sergio Perez, which we'll talk about that specifically. But does that cover the major points, guys?
Yep.
Yeah,
I don't have anything to add on Red Bull besides, man, when you really think about Red Bull and what has happened this year, you kind of forget because right now you're so focused on, are they actually going to win the championship? What are they going to do with Checo? And you kind of ask these questions and you forget that, oh yeah, Christian Horner was accused of like sexual advances on an employee, like sexual misconduct against an employee. And the Verstappens were looking like they were going to leave. And then you had the incident at Silverstone where, Jos was invited to drive, and then last minute he was told he couldn't drive, and everyone was like, Horner did that, and Horner was like, no, I didn't say anything. You think about the drama that's happened there, and you're kind of not surprised that they're in the situation that they are. They were so dominant, and you got to imagine Newey has been working a little bit on the car, but they probably don't want him touching it too much before he goes on gardening leave and joins another team. So just very interesting that you kind of forget what happened at the beginning of the year, and it kind of got swept under the rug because they were winning, and now they're not, and you're so worried about other things with Red Bull that you don't even remember those crazy things that happened at the beginning of the year.
The Formula One season comes at you so fast. It's hard to remember. Oh wait, we started in Bahrain and that was like March. It feels like 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Bobby, you're talking about your favorite team, the Papayas, McLaren.
Yeah. So they are known as the Papaya because their car has papaya orange on it. It used to be much more papaya orange. You can look over Bill's shoulder and see how much papaya was actually on it. Now it is a majority orange and black. Most of the teams have a lot of black in their color scheme this year, just as a general rule, because carbon fiber is very light and paint is heavy. So they are going much more raw carbon fiber, just something to kind of just pay attention to. And that's one of those technical things that if you follow F1, you find yourself getting caught into. So anyways, 2 drivers, Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri. I would make the argument, and these guys can disagree with me, but I would make the argument that they have the best driver lineup on the grid right now in terms of age, in terms of experience. Somehow, Lando Norris is one of the best young drivers on the grid and one of the most veteran drivers on the grid as well. Like it feels like he's been driving for 9 years now, but I believe he's on year 4, which is pretty veteran in F1.
Was he there in 2019? I thought he was there in 2019.
Yeah, maybe he was. I can't remember.
God,
off the top of my head, and I didn't write it down.
Year 6. Holy shit.
Yeah, so he's
I
been around
guess
a
he's
while.
been there. Yeah.
So,
he's a veteran.
I think was his first year.
So he is absolutely a veteran, but he's also. But he's
18.
also like 24 maybe. So real veteran guy there. So I would say they have the best young driver lineup. Once a long time ago, they were a great manufacturer, won multiple championships with Lewis Hamilton that we had mentioned earlier, struggled early last season. I don't know if you guys remember, but they were not good at the beginning of 2023. No, in fact, one of the worst cars on the grid. Late last year, they really started to pick it up. You saw some performances from them that kind of gave you hope going into this year. Coming into this year, I would have said they were maybe the 3rd best car. In my head, I said 4th, and then I kind of went back and looked at the results, and I was like, actually, they were probably the 3rd best car there. They were finishing top 5, top 6. So, I'd say they were the 3rd best car behind Red Bull and Ferrari. Ferrari came out on fire this year. After 5 races, McLaren brought some upgrades to the Miami race, and as we discussed earlier, that is where Lando Norris won his first race. They made the McLaren the fastest car on the grid. You guys may disagree, but overall, I believe they have the fastest car. The things Mercedes has done over the last couple of weeks has kind of given me a little bit of pause on that, but overall I would say the McLaren probably is the fastest car. The Red Bull, very fast, very quick, but when Max isn't driving it, it really seems it's kind of one of those, is it the car or is it the
driver pairing?
Is it the driver with Checo? So you kind of jump back and forth with that, but I would say the McLaren's the fastest car, evidenced by their driver Lando Norris winning his first race, even though, like I said earlier, he was aided by that lucky safety car. You did also get the win from Oscar Piastri. I'd say they've squandered probably 3 or 4 opportunities to, if not win a race, at least come very close to winning a race. The one where he got into the incident with Max. You have the safety car one. You have some other moments right this past race. Lando just can't figure out a start for some reason, and he drops back pretty often on his starts. So really good car, does great on race days, does great qualifying. They are my favorite team, and that is why I kind of cheer for them. Is they have Lando Norris. I'll pretty much follow him, but they now have the fastest car. Some of us who had to suffer last year are cheering pretty heavy now for McLaren.
Yep.
I think the only thing I'd add is, like you said, I think before on this, Bobby, they're a team that kind of needs to figure out how to win. Like, they've had a pretty good car at times the last couple seasons, not always, but like a car that they finished like 4th or 5th. You're like, hey, I can see it. Like, pretty good, but not a race winning car until like a couple of months ago, which I think that's, if you don't have learned experience winning, like regardless of the discipline, it's kind of a new thing. You kind of see that with them.
Yeah, it's one thing like, go ahead.
It's one thing to learn not to lose. It's entirely another thing to learn how to win.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's absolutely right.
You see that a lot with sports teams, right? The quarterback goes in and he makes the playoffs and they go to the divisional round. Then the next year they go to the Super Bowl, and then the year after that they win the Super Bowl. You just kind of have to learn how to put everything together. We have the talent. We can absolutely make it. I live in Dallas, right? The Dallas Cowboys, perfect example of that. Not trying to take shots at the Dallas Cowboys, even though I will pretty much always take an
go ahead. You're in good company.
Dallas Cowboys. But they do great in the regular season, but they just haven't figured out how to win in the postseason. And it's kind of getting to that point where you kind of have to figure it out. You've had the opportunities, you've lost the big games, you have to learn how to win. It's an acquired skill.
That's why you don't see organizations go from like bad to championship like overnight. It's usually bad to good to championship.
The Texans, right?
Houston Cougar basketball under Kelvin Sampson.
Yeah.
From the start till now, like we went from oh boy, we've sold 24 tickets to Final Fours and Elite Eights and Sweet 16 for the past 5 years.
And I remember sending this to you guys, at least Sam and maybe Dustin. I didn't send it to Bill, but no offense. It's just not something you and I talk about very often. But like when I was younger, when I was like a freshman in college, I'd go home for holidays and I'd look up, my parents had season tickets to Baylor for Baylor basketball. And I'd go to a couple of games, right? And they're fun to go to, but you look up in the rafters and you look at their women's basketball program and you saw like NIT qualifier. And then it was like NIT finalist. And then it was like NCAA tournament bid. And then it was NIT champion. Then it was Sweet 16, Final Four, national championship. So you just have to learn how to do it.
Speaking of a team that needs to learn how to do it, Bill, our most beautiful and inefficient and Italian team, Scuderia Ferrari. That is your team. Yeah, I got to do the Italian fingers. We're the Italian fingers. Tell us about Scuderia Ferrari's season.
Hey, so the Prancing Horses have been not on their current or not on their normal form, but I say that they haven't been on their normal form for like 15 years. They've been here since the very start. I take that back. They did not enter the very first Grand Prix ever because of money problems. Like there were disagreements about how much they were going to get paid out. But Ferrari has added an entry in every single F1 race since that one. Since 1950. They've been here almost 75 years, and fully 20% of it they have been absolute ass because they cannot get out of their own way. So they, being a historic team, they actually have a special clause in the Concord Agreement that governs the relationship between FIA and Formula One that says that they get 5% of all the prize money right off the top. You've been here forever. Please don't leave us. Here's 5%. Oh, and by the way, they have an escalator. It's going to go all the way up to 10%, which is going to be like $1.6 billion over time. Just for being here. Just for being here. They
haven't won a title since High Definition Television, and they
That's one of my favorite
single advantage. Look, if you've never watched an F1 race, you still know Ferrari, right? You know them as a racing team, and their fan base fits at both the will tell you that they can do no wrong, but I'm here to tell you, and the memes are here to tell you that they cannot do strategy. They just can't. They've had some seriously spectacular failures, and usually Leclerc is the one who pays for it. I feel bad for Charles Leclerc. He's a legitimately good driver. He's not living up to the expectations that were on him when he first signed up. Look, the man was supposed,
I'm letting you talk.
The man was supposed to be the next great thing, right? And he came in 2017. He had a good season at Sauber, and then he's been hampered by Ferrari more than anything else. He's got some really good wins to his name, a bunch of podiums, but I could see at a different team that, he would have a shot at a championship. Sainz is I've liked Sainz for a while. He started with Toro Rosso alongside Verstappen, and he was supposed to have a seat at Red Bull. And then Verstappen just showed up and Verstappened everywhere. And he was suddenly on the out. So he went to Renault and then McLaren, and now he's at Ferrari. And he's doing the best he can. But again, Ferrari's just not letting him shine. There were a couple of years there where Ferrari didn't so much produce engines as they produced grenades. And Leclerc had some trouble with that. Those were the couple of years where the strategy was actually good, but that, the engines are kind of important for car racing. So the team is you need 3 out of 3, and they're always like 2.5 out of 3 things that you've got going for them. They've had they're the back to the Cowboys, right? They're supposed to be America's team.
They're a good Cowboy. They're a good Cowboys parallel, honestly. Like incredible brand doesn't fucking win.
Haven't had a championship since 2007 with Kimi Räikkönen in his first stint there. I mean, it's been a long time, but they've got the most championships out of anybody. Granted, they've been here for all of them.
Yeah,
but they have huge success in the past. Now, next year is going to be real interesting because they somehow convinced Lewis Hamilton to put on some red overalls and come race for them, and they're gonna see Sainz leave and go to Williams. But man, that's going to be an interesting thing. I've watched them bring in former world champions only to squander that and then have those champions go to, probably Aston. I'm going to say it now. Hamilton alongside Alonso at Aston in like 2028, 2029. The Lance Stroll school for retiring drivers who still want to race and get a paycheck. Yeah, he's going to end up there after 3 or 4 disappointing years with Ferrari.
I'll just say this. I understand why you would want to get Lewis Hamilton on your team. He's one of the very small handful of best to ever do it, and that might honestly be like a conservative summation of his career.
Okay.
But Carlos Sainz, the non-Charles Leclerc driver there, is just so competent. He's so sneaky, just like, this guy, like, the floor is so much higher than so many other drivers. I don't think he gets enough credit for it. I don't think he's a disrespected guy, but like,
no, he's a sleeper, definitely.
He really just like the fact that he, in an era where Max Verstappen up until a couple months ago was winning almost everything, and Carlos Sainz still managed to get a couple race wins in there, I think speaks to his quality. I think it's a failure of small imagination that we'll get to this top where we will not overdo this topic right now, but that he is not going to be in a better team next year.
But, I do think that there's a real chance for Ferrari to do well next year. I have liked. I'm blanking on his name. Their team principal,
Fred Visser.
Frederick Vasseur has been slowly riding the ship. Came from Alfa Romeo last year. He's been good. I think he's been a steady hand where Binotto was a little more reactionary.
They need an outside voice. He is not a Ferrari life. Like the guys or a lot of the guys in the position before were Ferrari lifers, like guys who came through the ranks, and they desperately needed an outside voice to say, "This is good practice." Yeah, this is good practice. This is not. We're doing it my way, and they seem to have empowered him to do that. Sorry.
No, you're absolutely spot on. I hadn't even thought about it being from an outside perspective, but yeah, absolutely. And I think that they've got a real chance they're already clearly a top tier team, right? Up there with Red Bull and McLaren and Mercedes, but I could see them tightening that pod of 4, the top tier teams getting a little closer together with Ferrari taking a couple more right steps in the future.
So we're going to pass the conch shell from you, Bill, back to you. Mercedes, the team in 3rd place, or in 4th place, though, probably trending towards 3rd. Yeah. Tell us about the Silver Arrows.
So Mercedes is another one of those teams that's been around forever, but not really this time. They actually entered in 1954 and 55 with Juan Manuel Fangio and Sterling Moss, and Fangio actually got a championship with them in his first year there. But after that, they just dried up and quit racing F1 for 50 years. And when Braun GP folded, they had already had a Mercedes engine deal, so Mercedes just went, "Yeah, I'll have that, thank you," and promptly took a championship-winning team and kept it going. I mean, they were good They were very good, and it just so happened that Red Bull was on the up at that point. Right, that was Vettel, that was Adrian Newey getting the RB8, RB9, and eventually it broke through. Right, with the new V6 Reds, the Mercedes broke through, figured it out, and they had 8 championships back to back. Right, Lewis Hamilton picked up 7. Rosberg picked up 1 in the middle there, and then he said, "I've had my one. I'm going to retire and go be a really bad commentator." And then they brought along George Russell has been doing really well for them. I think that he was a great hire and continues to be. I was again shocked to see Lewis leaving Mercedes. He had been there, for a long time, right? 8 years.
Yeah.
9 years. I think the first race I ever watched, Lewis actually tried to pull into the McLaren pits because that was his previous team. And I thought at the time, like, oh God, okay, come on. He can't be that good. He's not a professional. I hadn't really paid attention to the fact that he had just won a championship with McLaren, a few years prior. But there's a lot of history. This team is very close knit. Lots of the same people have stayed there for a long time, with the exception of James Voles, who is now the team principal over at Williams. And just like Vasseur at Ferrari, Voles is doing a great job at Williams trying to turn that ship around. But Toto Wolff has been able to keep this team together for a very long time, and it has shown the stability has been key for Mercedes, and I think they've got a really good chance to stay in that top 2, 3, 4 place for years to come, especially if they get the right hire. For Lewis's seat, if I see them get Antonelli next year, I'm of 2 minds. Yeah, phenom, but also rookie in a top seat usually spells disaster. I would love to see Antonelli get a shot, but I'd like to see him at like a Williams or a Sauber, somewhere to prove himself, just like Leclerc and who am I thinking of? Russell.
Yeah, Russell.
They've all had their you come up through the ranks, but I don't know who else would go. I don't know who else they would have. Mick Schumacher is their reserve driver. He's crashy. He's very crashy.
Believe it or not, Mick Schumacher actually is going to come up very briefly in this podcast a little bit later. But
look,
just to be fair, he was crashy in a Haas.
Yeah, but a Haas is way cheaper than a Mercedes. I mean,
it's also less likely.
It's not going to be Mick Schumacher. I have as good of a chance. Well, I don't have as good of a chance because Mick Schumacher.
And he was driving a 1-year-old car that they said is the current car. That was a terrible situation for Mick.
It's not going to be Mick, though. Sorry,
no, it won't be
Mick Schumacher.
But we'll get to that later. Like we have a whole part on.
Yeah, whether the car is 1 year old or 10 years old, it doesn't go into barriers any easier. That's all. Anywho, I think it's going to be Antonelli just because of the way the rules have been kind of fudged. The 17, 18-year-old limit that was put into place after Verstappen joined in. Not that it mattered. He turns 18 in like 2 weeks, right? So I'm smart money's on him being in the Hamilton vacated seat next year.
Bobby, I know you're dying to talk about our 5th place team here in the constructors at the somewhat newly, I guess they're in the 3rd year, as the Aston Martin branded team. The artist formerly known as Racing Point, the artist formerly known as Force India. Tell us about Aston Martin, Bobby. I know you're really stoked to talk about them.
So,
did you get more than 3 words for them?
Yeah, no. Look.
Oh, that's good. I'm impressed. Earlier, you were talking about how you weren't able to say anything about
really, I'm just making shit up here. No, their drivers are Lance Stroll and how many time world champion?
2-time, right? For Alonso, yeah.
Yeah. Fernando Alonso, 2-time world champion. I couldn't remember if it was 1 or 2. So basically, let me break this down for you. So you have Lance Stroll and you have Fernando Alonso. So this is the only team owned by one dude. I mean, he's got other investors, but he's the owner. The owner's name is Lawrence Stroll. Now, those of you who are smart, notice that I said Lance Stroll drives and Lawrence Stroll is the owner. And if you're smart, you'd go, hey, wait a minute. Those are two not similar, or those are two very similar last names and not a very common one. You'd be correct. Lawrence is Lance's dad. And the only reason why Lance has a job in F1 is because his dad owns the team. That's right. His dad is a bazillionaire and literally just bought an F1 team so his son could drive an F1, have an F1 seat. And if you're like, oh, but he still had to be pretty good to get to F1, you'd be right. Like, he did win other championships, but I actually watched like a 30 minute documentary on him, and it's insane. It's absolutely insane. His dad bought the team. His like F4.
His dad bought junior teams too. Yeah.
Yeah. His dad bought like an F4 and F3 team, and they brought in an older driver. Lance finished second in the championship in like F3 or F4. I can't remember exactly which one it is.
I think it was 4 because I think remember you telling us. I think it's 4.
He placed second place behind his teammate. But his teammate technically couldn't win the championship because he was too old to win the championship. So Lance won the title. So like Lance was declared champion because his teammate
I didn't even know that.
Who beat him by like 1,000,000 points was too old to win the title.
Like some 24-year-old driving around against a bunch of 16-year-olds.
Yeah,
this is great. I get paid
getting paid a ton of money by Lawrence so that he could, train his son and stuff.
Quick aside. I took first year Spanish as an elective when I was a senior. I fucking wiped the floor with those freshmen and that because it was first year Spanish. And I'd been in high school for 4 years. Sorry.
Yeah, you know how to study better. Like, yeah. So this guy won.
I thought this test was hard.
Yeah, and then Lance got promoted, but he got promoted because his dad bought the F2 team, and the F2 team basically nuked his teammate's car, so Lance looked like the better driver. And look, Lance still had to beat a bunch of other drivers, so I'm not taking it away. But his dad did buy like Perma F2 and F3, which are like the best teams. Like, even though
they still own Prima?
No, I don't know. Sure not. I don't know. So like they use a stock car. Like it's a series where all the cars are the same. But money has a lot of influence in there because you win on the edges in F2, F3. And Lawrence just put a lot of money in, nuked his teammate's car, and then Lance won the title. So, and then Lance got his job in F1 with Williams because Lawrence basically bought his seat and paid a ton of money for it. And then it just kind of went up from there. So sorry to get off, but yes, you have that. You have Lance, who probably wouldn't have a F1 career if his dad didn't own the team. And his dad has brought in 2 multiple-time world champions to mentor him, and he's still ass. So, like, he had one of the best drivers of all time before they had Fernando Alonso. They get Fernando Alonso, and Lance is still not good. So, like, I think they were hoping with Fernando Alonso that Lance would eventually start beating Fernando. Fernando's pretty old, and they were hoping that Fernando would see a little bit of a drop-off and Lance would go forward. That has not happened. Fernando is still kicking Lance's ass, and it's hilarious to watch. So much so that you think, like, that there's a chance that Lawrence may sell the F1 team because his son sucks so bad, and he's like, I don't know why I keep pumping money into this. His dad bought Aston Martin so that they would have a title sponsor for the car. Like, it's insane when you really think about the money that Lawrence has put in for Lance to have an F1 seat.
Built a whole factory for the team and like a wind tunnel.
Yeah. Now, it's one thing for your dad to be the team owner and you can see, oh yeah, they're related. It would be another thing entirely for him to use his own name as the title sponsor. So the Stroll F1 team. And
so he had to get the
driving with Lance Stroll. That they at least know not to go that far.
Yeah.
Give him a little credit.
But then, I texted you guys this as I was doing my research. I wish there was something exciting or interesting to talk about with this team on track. They're not good enough to compete with the top 4, and they're head and shoulders above anybody else below them. When you look at the constructor standings, the next team, so Aston Martin has 73 points. Mercedes is the 4th place team that we just talked about. They have 266. So the top 4 are head and shoulders over Aston, right? But then you look at Aston Martin, they have more than double the next team. So literally what they do is they show up, they take 8th, 9th, maybe 10th, and then they go home, but they don't challenge anybody where it's interesting. They don't get passed by anybody where it's interesting. When they qualify, one of their drivers makes Q3, where they finish in the top 10 of qualifying. The other one finishes in like 12th. They both advance a couple of places, and they go home. It's the most insignificant team on the F1 grid this year.
Look, 2/3 of those points are from Alonso. He's got 49 points.
Absolutely.
He's got 49 points to Stroll's 24. And yeah, I mean, if you wanted to be charitable, you could call it workmanlike. Show up, punch in, get a result, punch out, go home. But they're just mired in the midfield, pretty much on the back of Stroll not progressing. I truly think that if Stroll could string a couple of these together and actually have grown under Vettel and under Alonso, they wouldn't be half bad. Hell, last year at the beginning of the season, for the first 5 or 6 races, they were the number 2 car on the field.
And then they didn't bring any upgrades. And
then they couldn't. Yeah, they.
And then the ones they did made the car much worse.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say at the break last year, they went backwards, but you're right. They are the definition of mid.
Really are. I will get, and I hate to do this, give like Lance Stroll a tiny bit of credit here. Right before last season's race, like a couple of weeks before last season, the start of it, he wiped out mountain biking because a lot of these guys do preseason stuff. Broke bones in his lower extremities, broke one or both wrists, broke bones in like one of his feet. And despite having the most secure job, like you could not have a more secure, just like, hey man, take a week or 2 off and like get back in there. He was there at the opening 23 race and actually did fairly well, like finished in the top 10. And it was just like with like non-fun, which just tells you even the most privileged of these guys are told just like freak athlete psychopaths. Like, and I mean that psychopath in the most complimentary way I'll ever give to Lance Stroll.
And there are photos of him in double wrist braces.
Yeah.
Just before he gets in the car. It's insane.
All I thought of with that, and this is going to be terrible, those of you who have watched Talladega Nights, when he gets his arm broken by the French guy, and then he breaks the track record, and he's like, I'm racing. I got my arm wrapped up like a goddamn gordita out here. That's all I can think of. And he's like yelling at them to cut off the cast. I'm sorry, that's all I thought of. Every time I saw him like walking around, it was like, that's all I thought of.
And the thing is, I always kind of thought that was just kind of, oh, you played up for. No, that's exactly what this dude did.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hadn't put that together.
All right.
Our 6th place team, Visa Cash App Red Bull as their full name. Eagle-eyed listeners will be like, wait a minute, did we just not talk about a Red Bull team earlier? This is basically the Red Bull Junior team, even though they have their own employees, their own car, team base of operations. They're owned by Red Bull, just like the team we talked about a bit earlier. Long story short, the now deceased Red Bull founder, if I remember right, Bill, did a solid F1 leadership and bought a team that was like in bankruptcy before F1 teams were like were as high of a property for super rich guys. Basically did a favor to them by making sure that they didn't lose a team from the grid, gave his team a junior team. Max Verstappen started his F1 career with them, fellow multi-time world champion, recently retired guy we've mentioned a few times. Seb Vettel started there. A few other guys who were on the grid but are no longer Red Bull drivers, Pierre Gasly, Alex Albon, Carlos Sainz, all had stints for this team. And the notable thing here is that it's not really a junior team anymore for its actual purpose. You have
a sister team.
Well, I mean, they call themselves that, but like they've actually, the funny thing is they finally admitted, like, yeah, it's our junior team, but one of their drivers is 35-year-old Daniel Ricciardo, who raced for this team over a decade ago as a younger driver. And one of them, Yuki Tsunoda, is more an age profile that, you know, I guess junior driver age. He's, I think, still in his early to mid 20s, but is now in his 4th season with the team and very much seems like this is as far as the team will let him go. It's very much part of the fact that Honda's a partner for them and Honda wants Yuki in one of their seats. And they're like, okay, he's a pretty decent driver. We'll keep him there. And I would say Ricciardo has gotten his performance up to about the same level as Tsunoda to this point in the season. Ricciardo's probably the most realistic candidate to team up with Verstappen if Red Bull at some future point that they've said won't happen, but could happen, decides to fire Sergio Perez mid-season. Kind of a bummer that Tsunoda seems like he won't be able to get in that car. I think the most interesting thing to watch long-term is if this team can find a seat for promising junior driver Liam Lawson, who had a cameo last season when Ricardo broke his hand during a crash at practice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think way outperformed expectation. That's the thing I'm most interested in is, can they get this guy a seat? Can they keep the car at least in the top 10 a lot of weekends?
Yeah, you were saying that Mateschitz did F1 a solid. Yeah, he took over the Minardi team.
Minardi, that's right.
Funny enough, he actually had done them a solid previously by taking over the Jaguar team to become Red Bull, formerly Stuart Ford, I think. But yeah, I mean, he's done them a solid a couple of times, and they've changed names so many times. They were Toro Rosso, then they were Alpha Tauri, now they're Visa Cash App RB Racing Team or whatever the crap. Like, yeah. Come on, pick a name. There's only one team, and we'll come to them later. There's only one team with an equally comical name, and we'll get to them in a little bit. But yeah, they've had some amazing drivers come up through the ranks, and I don't know what they're going to do when the Honda engines go away and Yuki leaves, but hopefully we get a Lawson seat.
All right. Yeah, we're going to talk. Yeah. Bob, as I say, unless you had some trenchant insight about Red Bull's junior team.
Nope. Have at it.
Bill, tell us about the one USA team. A team that has certainly no history taking on sketchy, evil foreign money. A team
with grifters. Certainly not.
Certainly not. Gene Haas, nothing there worth unpacking.
The American way.
Tell us about Haas, Bill. Tell us about the surprisingly not bad season that the one USA team, the team rounding out our midfield tier, is having.
I still think of Haas as the newest F1 team, and they are the newest. They've been here a decade now. And looking back, it's kind of like, wait, hang on. They've really been racing for 10 years, and they had Kevin Magnussen come back twice. Like, okay, cool, fine. So they've been okay. When they first started, they bought up all of the Marussia gear, factory equipment, old cars, everything, and then they partnered with Ferrari, and Ferrari said, "Here, we're going to make you sort of a junior team. We're going to sell you as many parts as the FIA will allow, and you just get to put them together, have fun. Here's your Lego kit. Go build you an F1 car, son." And they have. They've done fine. Under Steiner, I think they were constantly bouncing around looking for new sponsors. Rich Energy and Your Alkali, and really top tier quality sponsors, not at all known for grifting. Certainly at least one of them sold a real product, and the other one was Rich Energy. Like,
I was saying, you do not besmirch the potash fertilizer of Uralkali and Dmitry Mazepin.
I'm all about the cow shit that Mazepin brought. Also, also the cow shit that they were using as a sponsor. So the new hotness this year is Ayao Komatsu. He's the new team principal. Steiner box smashed his way out of the door one more time and left. And I think Komatsu has brought a new. He seems to be better with the budget than Steiner. I don't know if that's just, that Steiner built something up and Komatsu inherited it, but their car seems to be better put together this year than last, and better put together last year than the year before. But he was, I think, their technical director.
He was, yeah.
Yeah, he was.
Okay, it was either technical or sporting director, and they promoted him. He's done really well. K-Mag has not done them any favors with the massive crash. What was that, Monaco? No, that was the double. Yeah, it was Monaco. The double retirement with K-Mag taking out Hulkenberg. That was an expensive moment. They've had a lot of expensive moments. They've had historically one competent driver and one very crashy driver. They've had K-Mag, competent driver, alongside Grosjean, crashy driver. They went with K-Mag and Mick. They tried 1 year of two crashy drivers when they had Mick and Mazepin, and then they decided that wasn't so good. So they brought back Hulkenberg out of retirement, and K-Mag went, you know what, I've done the competent thing. Let's do the crashy thing this year. So we'll see where this all goes. Next year, they're going to have Ocon and blanking. Sorry.
Ollie Bierman, but we're gonna do silly season later.
Yep.
Thank you, Bierman.
We're gonna do all that here in a minute, I believe.
And I think that they're gonna be okay. They're gonna have their competent driver in Ocon, even though he's had a crash or two this year. But they'll have a rookie, and I think a good rookie. So I'm looking forward to that. I think the shock this year, though, is that they're in 7th place right now. They've had a bunch of DFLs over their career. They've had one 4th place finish. I think K-Mag had on his debut race, he took 4th in the Australian Grand Prix with them, and then he was promoted, or he was DSQ'd for some dumb reason or other. But they've had flashes of brilliance. We'll see if that continues to show up next year.
All right, so we're going to the back marker tier, the tier of teams that is notable if they finish in the top 10. And I think we're going to talk about the most dysfunctional of those teams, Alpine. And I don't think I'd get much counter argument from you guys that Alpine, spelled like Alpine, is the most dysfunctional F1 team right now, and that the Renault Group, the famous French auto manufacturer, is the most dysfunctional organization. Red Bull's up there, but they still have a very good car and likely will for the foreseeable future, even if they're not winning championships. You could do a full series of podcasts about this team's past and present shenanigans. Long story short, this is the F1 team, like I said, of the French car company Renault, branded with its sports car brand Alpine. They have a weird setup where the F1 car's engine is manufactured in France, but the team's F1 operation base is largely in England. The parent company loves to interfere for the most seemingly inane or insignificant reasons, but also only offers a fraction of the financial support of the big names in Formula One. I think they've had 5 different people in the team principal role in the past 4 seasons, which would be crazy sports executive turnover in any sport. For F1, it is almost unprecedented. There's not guys are usually given multiple years to figure it out as a slow moving sport, because developing a car is not a fast moving thing necessarily. All signs point to this team stopping making their own engines when the sport has a scheduled major change to its regulations in 2 years, 2026. There's a rumor that at least some of their staff in France and the engine side will go on strike over this news over the summer break. Oh, and their cars this season.
They will go on strike in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks. Their car this season is also fucking terrible. Like in the previous few seasons, this was like a middle of the pack team. It would have been the tier above this tier before if we had done this last season. Yeah, with McLaren. Like they were around the same place McLaren was. And now it's notable if they even get one car in the top 10 in a race. And they also made the decision before last season to get a pair of drivers who very publicly did not like each other. It was not a secret that Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly, their 2 drivers, do not like each other. We've had multiple on-track incidents between the 2 guys. Shocker. If I could wish cast anything, guys, I think it would be for some entity that has deep pockets and really wants to be an F1 to take this team off Renault's hands. I mean, I think calling something deeply unserious gets overused by the kids these days, but I think deeply unserious is a good 2-word description of how Renault runs this Formula One team. Bobby?
I can think of another person starting with an A that's been really trying to get into F1 and has deep pockets and has some ties. And
Michael Schmandretti.
Michael Schmandretti, yeah. He's a crazy one now. GM is talking about buying their engines to rebrand them.
It's not precedent for a team to be like, for an auto manufacturer to be like, you know what? We actually don't want to make our engines here. Teams get into F1 as a brand thing. Like, oh wow, like Ferrari's in F1.
Or,
and
yeah.
they bring in the technology when they that's
there's
why
road
the
car
whole 2026
applications.
the whole reason why the 2026 regulations are what they are is because the manufacturers wanted to incorporate more hybrid technology, more more alternative fuels, that kind of stuff, and so
And I was just like,
out.
no, thank you. We do not want to be in this Formula One.
I think they just couldn't make a good engine, to be honest.
Oh no, yes, it's terrible.
They had some real success with Red Bull. Again,
the title winning teams had those, right?
Oh yeah.
But
they built grenades
Red
too.
Bull
They were
Infinity.
very unreliable.
But after that, when we switched to the V6 turbos, they forgot how to build an engine. They just straight up decided, no, we like making smoke machines, and it was so bad. The Hondas were not good, but the Renaults were always worse, and that's why Red Bull is now with Hondas, because they just got fed up with Renault. They actually quit even letting Renault put their name on the car. They rebranded the Renault engines as Tag Heuers so that they wouldn't have to have the French stench all over their car.
Just like, again, just the last thing that an auto manufacturer should want from getting into Formula One. Bobby, tell us about one of the last. I think you've referred to him in our group chat, Bill, as the last of the privateer teams.
Yes.
The last of the Williams.
You still have Aston Martin. You will respect Aston Martin in the Strolls. No.
Oh, I will not.
Williams,
but
Williams. So we will move on to Williams. So I don't know how you guys feel about this, but this is one of the most interesting teams on the grid. The future for Williams looks pretty crazy, but they have an amazing history, but they have consistently been near the back in recent history. They just didn't have any money. The Williams family finally sold to a private investment firm called Doralton. Yeah, Doralton Capital. They hired a guy from the old Mercedes. Bill talked about how consistent Mercedes was. They hired James Vowles, who was arguably one of the, if not the most important person on those F1 teams in terms of their strategy and coming up with how they were going to address the race. So great hire there. And we were seeing a little bit of a change from Williams. They have made a car that probably isn't the worst and has actually hit points this year, which is something we couldn't say about them even last year, the year before. Maybe they hit points occasionally, but they got 4 points so far this year. I would make the argument they probably have the 8th best car top to bottom this year. Alpine has looked really good the last couple of races, and that's where they've gotten most of their points. But Williams has looked consistently hanging out around that 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th range. At least one of their drivers, their top driver, Alex Albon, has. They also have the only American on their team, the only American on the grid, Logan Sargent. He will not be on an F1 grid next year. He is a fine driver, but just probably going to do really well in IndyCar.
Out of the 20 best drivers in the world, he is 21st.
I especially recently, I think we've had this discussion. I don't know if he's the 20th worst one.
He ain't better than 17th.
No, oh God, no. But he's not going to have a drive next year. But what I do want to say is, if you are looking to pick a team that if you're listening to this and you're like, I want to do this, I want to watch this. This sounds like fun. This seems like fun. Williams is going to be pretty fun the next couple of years. They finally look like they got their shit together. They're getting a Mercedes engine in 2026. They already use a Mercedes engine, but they're going to have another 2026.
They're going to have the engine that looks like it could be the best.
And everyone is saying how the Mercedes engine is just going to absolutely kill everybody in 2026. They have, who I would argue is probably a top 5 driver on the grid, joining their team in Carlos Sainz next year. Alexander Albon used to drive for Red Bull, got cut from that team, took a couple of years off, I believe, and came back and is head and shoulders above his teammate and is just performing really well.
The only thing I would add here, because Logan Sargent has not been good in F1, but the only thing I bristle about is that the implication that he's on the grid because he's an American. Like that, say what you want. That guy earned his way through the junior categories. Like, Does he come from money? Sure. Nearly every guy in F1 does, but he's not like Lance Stroll rich. Like he had to repeat a level, I think, at junior ranks because he didn't have enough money for F2 because it requires even more money if you're not like in someone's. I think being a Williams Academy driver eventually helped out with that, but like earned his way by performance to F1 is now earning his way out of F1 by that performance. Very unfortunately,
found his ceiling, and it's unfortunately like 20th on the grid.
He'll still get. I think he'll still have a career where he gets paid a good amount of money to drive a car fast for a while, though. Like he's not about to be unemployed.
It's a rough life, you know.
Yeah,
but like he is, like Bobby said, he's going to be really good at IndyCar. I think
maybe WEC, World Endurance Championship for if you're not.
I could see him going there. I honestly, I think it would be, I mean, a little on the nose, but kind of hilarious to see him in NASCAR. I have enjoyed watching former F1 drivers in NASCAR.
Long story short, his brother actually made the switch to stock cars and just bombed badly. I don't think he'll be making the switch to stock cars at this point in his career.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah, he had an older brother who was like in the junior ranks, a couple years older than him as well, and like Dalton's. No, I can't remember if that's his rich uncle or anyway. Like had a brother that raced in the junior categories and then just like bombed badly when he tried to do like lower level NASCAR.
So nobody's gonna give him a chance.
Probably not.
Yeah,
but he'll get paid fast by somebody to, you know, whether it's IndyCar or WEC or some other lower racing category. He'll make money to drive a car fast. His life isn't bad, even though he's about to be not an F1. All right.
I don't know.
Last but certainly least, Bill.
His reserve.
Yeah, right. Tell us about Sauber, Bill, the soon-to-be Audi, the team that has not scored a single point in the current season.
In a world full of race cars, Sauber decided to sell agricultural equipment. Y'all, they're not good. They're not good. They have a beautiful green livery. I love the neon green because it's always immediately you can pick it out.
Yeah. Well, you can also pick it out because it's in the back
behind everyone.
Well, okay, so there's not very many cars around to make it difficult to find. Fine.
Look, what car is that in 19th and 20th? Oh shit! It's good.
But no, Sauber has some history. You know, they were tied up with BMW in 2007, 2008, and they took third in the world constructors championship. They were good, and now they're not. BMW left, said we're gonna take our engines and go home. We don't want to be part of this anymore. And it was in the same time that Toyota left and Honda left the first time. It was the global financial crisis, and everybody just went, I'm done. I can't afford to spend $300 million on a marketing exercise. And ever since then, Sauber has been strapped for cash. They've had bad seasons. They've had really bad seasons, and they've had DFLs. But Audi has stepped up and said, hey, you know, we're going to be an engine manufacturer. We want to have a works team. We're going to buy Sauber. We're going to turn it into a full works team, full backing from the Volkswagen Automotive Group.
Backing is kind of
okay. All right, full backing. Full backing. You know, originally when Volkswagen were saying, "Oh yeah, we're going to have Porsche and Audi," and they were going to make it a whole thing. They've walked it back a lot, but it's still going to be a works team. They're going to get more backing than Alpine does, that's for sure. But, you know, the only problem is part of that is with any change in ownership, you get a change in who's at the top and in the middle and even sometimes at the bottom. And so they've gone through some pretty high-profile hirings and firings. Four Rings hired Jonathan Wheatley, like Sam was mentioning earlier, from Red Bull, their former sporting director. He's going to be their chief technical officer. And they had originally lured Andreas Seidel away from McLaren in March to be their CEO. But now that they've hired Mattia Binotto to be their team principal, somehow that means that their CEO spot had to be vacated. You explain that to me. I don't get it, but okay, fine. And Binotto came from Ferrari, where he, you know, like Sam was saying, was a Ferrari lifer and caused them some headaches. we'll see. There's some turmoil at the top. I don't see a lot of stability so far, but who knows? They've hired Hulkenberg away from Haas for next year. German driver, German mark. They're gonna try and tie that up and get some commercial appeal out of him. Hulk is a good driver. He's average, right? He's replaced.
That's the reason why Haas, the team we got done talking about, is having a good season by their standards.
Yeah, exactly. And he's a good driver, so I can see him being there on merit. He's going to be a good get for them. I think they're going to stick with Bottas. I don't see them keeping Joe. Zhou Guanyu is a Chinese paid driver who, again, like all paid drivers, like Stroll, like even like Latifi from a couple years ago, they all have to get their super license. They all have to be qualified and good enough to be on the grid. That doesn't mean that they're going to be good enough to stay on the grid, but they do have to get there. And Joe got there. He looked really promising in his rookie year, but I don't know. I don't know if it was that nasty, horrible crash at Silverstone where his car went upside down and over the barriers, but he hasn't looked the same since last year. He's been kind of moseying around at the back of the pack. And it could just be that he's in a kick. Sauber, Stake, F1, whatever the hell they're calling themselves. Like, their name is ludicrous. What is it? Stake F1 team kick Sauber.
Kick Sauber like, F1.
I mean, that's as bad as
because
RBF1 team.
Well, it's because Kick is a betting website, or one of the two.
Stakes the gambling website.
The gambling website, and you can only do that.
In some countries, they can't have stake involved, so they go by Kick.
Yeah.
I mean, they're trying to put things together, and they are struggling mightily. When they quit being Alfa Romeo and they quit getting the same sort of backing from what little backing they were getting from Stellantis, I don't know. They've had a hard time at the back of the pack, and this is true. All the back markers have had a hard time getting money, right? Mm-hmm. Like they're all going to have problems getting sponsors, because who's going to watch? Who's going to get their name on a car at the back of the grid? You want to be at the front of the grid, so you're getting the lower tier sponsors. You're not able to fight for points, and points are how you get paid at the end of the year. So it's hard to dig your way out of being a back marker. I think Sauber might have a chance at it in 2026 when the engine regulations change. If the Audi engine nails it like Mercedes nailed it in 2014, we'll see. But right now, I don't know.
It's not a good car. Just like
it's not a good car. It's a tractor.
We gave them way too many words for a car that just sucks ass. Like, it's just a bad car. They don't do anything
like George Carlin would call it, the good old country shit box.
It's awful. It's such a bad car.
All right, we're running a little bit long, guys. We have one more segment of important stuff to talk about here. Sign with you. Silly season, maybe our favorite part, the moving of drivers out of teams, into teams, to other teams. So I've 3 questions for the three of us to kick around. We go with that. Kind of, I think hit all the various comings and goings. So I'm going to start with you on this one, Bobby. Does Lewis Hamilton break the all-time record with an 8th Drivers' Championship during his time racing with Ferrari? And show your work.
Yeah, so I actually think he does. I think they are going to prioritize him as the number 1 driver. I think that he is going to race until he accomplishes that. That's kind of my whole thought behind it. Is not that I think that they're going to win in 26 or that they're going to... We haven't seen any drop-off, right? A lot of times once you see drivers start to get older, you start to see a little bit of a drop-off. There's no drop-off with Lewis. Lewis is arguably the best driver on his team still. And so I think the Ferrari's going to do enough. That car's going to be good enough that he will win he will win an 8th title. And I think he's going to do it with Ferrari just because Ferrari has given him like that ambassador title and things like that, that there's going to be more to it than just driving a car. And so I don't see him leaving, to what Bill said earlier, right? Where Bill was like, I see him going to Aston or something like that. I don't see him going to Aston at all because Ferrari is paying him an ungodly amount of money to drive a Ferrari.
I'm just going to hop in and say, look, Ferrari paid Vettel an ungodly amount of money to drive a Ferrari. It was Vettel wanted to be the new Schumacher, and he got so close. If he had won a championship at Ferrari, would have been up there. Same breath. But again, Ferrari is where champions go for one last fling at the top of the grid before they move off to the happy track in the sky, right? I mean, Raikkonen may have gone to Alpha for his last little, I'm going to go retire, but Alonso and Vettel are both went to Aston. I don't see Ferrari getting Lewis his 8th championship. I think that functionally, if you put Lewis in a Ferrari with let's say a Mercedes strategist, they're not terribly different from Lewis in a Mercedes with a Mercedes strategist. I don't think that he has it in him to get an 8th championship at Ferrari. Quite frankly, if he had it to get it at Ferrari, in a Ferrari, he could do it in a Mercedes, and I haven't seen any inkling that he's going to. So I don't think he's going to get his championship, his 8th championship. I think he stays tied with Schumacher for 7. I would love to witness history. I would love to be wrong. I think he's going to look amazing in red, and I think he's going to do an amazing job. I think he is going to be prioritized. I think you're right about that. He is going to get the priority over Leclerc. Maybe that priority is what he needs. Maybe this is one of those things where Leclerc and Sainz don't have a clear number 1 driver, so they don't get clear preference. Maybe there's some magic there.
I think Ferrari desperately wants to have him in the car to win the 8th, and they are going to put so much money. They are going to hit the budget cap, and they are going to find every loophole to hit the budget cap that they can.
It's a catering budget, guys, I swear.
Yeah, they're going to do something crazy like that. They're going to do something insane with an engine like they did in 2019. They're going to figure out a way to get him that title. Sam, what do you think, bud?
I'll believe the moment Ferrari wins the title I believe they win it at the exact moment I see it, even with Lewis Hamilton, an all-time great. I'm not saying they can't, not saying they won't ever win again in my lifetime, but I am not in the business of predicting Ferrari wins. That is my answer to that. Bill, I'm going to start this next question with you. I started this one as the follow-up, but I think this is actually the better question to just ask about this guy, Sergio Perez, the second Red Bull driver we've mentioned a few times. At what point, you made the exact day, month, whatever, but when does Red Bull finally pull the trigger on replacing Perez, and who goes into that seat for him?
So, look, Perez earned his way into Red Bull. Straight up. That win at Sakir in 2020, where he spun on the first lap and came from behind to win it, in that racing point, stellar. Absolutely mind-boggling performance. He earned that seat. Albon hadn't done enough for Marco to say you get to stay. Fine. And since then, he has been fine. He hadn't been great, hadn't been terrible. He's been fine. And I think the problem is they don't have anybody in their stable that's any better than fine, right? Tsunoda is good, but I don't think he's really available to Red Bull because they won't have the Honda tie. I think if they were to stay in Honda engines for another 2 years, maybe you could see Tsunoda at Red Bull. I don't think Ricardo is past his prime. When he left and went to Renault, that was the end of him being in a Red Bull. I don't see him going back to Red Bull. And that's because I think that they're going to just stay with Checo until the end of his contract. They just extended him. Unless something magical happens in 2025, Lawson comes in for V-Carb and absolutely stuns them and makes it very clear that he's supposed to be in that Red Bull seat. I think they stick with Checo because, better to go with the evil you know than to try the evil you don't. I mean, I just don't see him. He's just going to peter out at Red Bull.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a Red Bull driver next year, even if he may not. You could talk about Yuki deserving it. You could talk about Danny Rick has that tie in the history and all that kind of stuff. He worked, he worked great with Max Verstappen. But they were friends, and they definitely had their incidents and things like that. But I definitely think the money that he brings in from sponsorships that he brings in with the Mexican market, I think those play huge roles in decisions. Yeah. If it's all about racing, they wouldn't have kept him. If it was all about what somebody can do on the track, Yuki Tsunoda would be in that seat, and Liam Lawson would be in the V car right now. But it's not. There's other things about it that make it where they are going to keep Checo. Checo's in the seat. They wouldn't have done the whole giant press conference with him if they weren't super confident in it. I know they have outs in the contract where if he falls so far behind Max or anything like that. But who's to say that Danny Rick wouldn't fall that far behind Max Verstappen or something like that? So I do see it being Checo. A lot of people don't want it to be Checo, but I do think it's just going to be Checo. Sam, what do you think, bud?
I think they're going to do the most illogical thing, which is say, do what they're doing now. Say they're going to stick with Checo and then fire him 4 races from now and bring in Daniel Ricciardo, who does basically precisely what Checo does, finish somewhere between 6th and below the points. And
so
they end up.
You think they're going to gasly this guy?
I think they're going to they're going to finally be like, you know what? F it. Let's see what Daniel Ricciardo can do here and give him a chance to do basically the same thing Perez is doing. Although I really do think the fact that he is an immensely, I can tell you, the person in gear combo I saw the most when I was at the Las Vegas Grand Prix in person last year was Mexican fans or Mexican American fans there for Checo. The 2 guys next to me on my left side of the race had come from, I want to say, somewhere in Baja California to see Checo. The cheers that Checo got when he went by our grandstand were bigger than anyone else by far. That translates to Red Bull can sales. Apparently, the Thai part of the company is very into keeping their extremely profitable second driver along with Max Verstappen in that seat. So I think that's going to be a big fight. I'm not 100% sure my prediction, but Red Bull likes to do the most knee-jerk thing that also is kind of the most illogical thing, like mid-season firings, what have you. So I'm going to say that Checo does eventually get yeeted off the grid this year, but not after a few more chances to prove that he's just completely incapable of driving this car, which he's basically done from the moment the season started, to be quite honest. Bobby, you're getting this next question. We're going to be a little more negative here. What are you saying,
quick? There were rumors recently that Liberty Media actually stepped in to save Checo's job at the break.
The Mexican Grand Prix is very load bearing on Checo.
You were saying it was all over at Vegas. It was all over at Austin. I mean, just people from Guadalajara were up. He's from Guadalajara, so there were folks that were wearing Guadalajara ponchos over, and it was dry, right? But ponchos that say Guadalajara over a Red Bull mechanic shirt. So I think you might be right. The commercial appeal is there. Anyway.
All right. Bobby, I believe you're up next.
I'm
getting you this question. What driver move from this current silly season is the one you just have your hardest time wrapping your mind around? That could be either from perspective of why does the team want this guy or why does the driver want to move here?
Okay, so am I allowed to talk about perspective moves that we all suspect are going to happen?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Kimi Antonelli into a Mercedes seat. I told you guys this. I don't understand it. He's 17 and you're going to put him in a top flight car. I know that one of the big regrets that Toto Wolff, the head of Mercedes F1 team, has is that he let Max Verstappen go. Right, Max was a Mercedes driver at one point, and he got poached by Red Bull, and that's a big regret that Toto Wolff has. But and so you want to do anything to keep your young, promising driver ready to go, but or excited to join your team. And in fact, what happened with Alpine and Oscar Piastri, right? They kind of held him off, said, "You're going to get a seat. You're going to get a seat. You're going to get a seat. We're going to get you a seat. We're going to get you a seat." And then they didn't. And then he just left, and they were left high and dry. And I know that's what Toto's scared of, is losing this generation's Max Verstappen or having a Piastri situation. But putting him into the Mercedes seat is so absurd. That car, from everything we're hearing, won this year. It's looked really good the last couple of races. Everything we're hearing about 2026, that car is going to be, everyone is saying that's the best engine, and you're putting it in the hands of a 19-year-old, and you're hoping that he does well. And it feels, to equate this to our non-F1 fans, this feels like when you get a rookie quarterback who may not quite be ready, and you put him out there for game one in that first season, and he struggles, and you're just like, what happened? And then he doesn't have a good career. Like, he Daniel Jones it, right? Daniel Jones wasn't ready to be an NFL quarterback, but he was drafted and they brought him up, and then he wasn't a very good NFL quarterback. Could he have been? Probably, but he wasn't, right? So that's why I think Kimi Antonelli going to Mercedes-Benz, if he does, is not even close the worst move of the silly season. Bill, what do you think?
But he's like, all I'll say, I get it. He is one of the better. He's probably the best junior prospect in terms of hype and stuff since Max Verstappen was put in a Red Bull seat at age, or a Red Bull junior seat at age 17. Like, don't disagree with the word you're saying, but also just like the temptation, be like, oh my God, like this kid's like generational.
But they put him in the junior seat.
But
right?
but Williams doesn't want to waste half their seats on a guy who's 18. Like,
absolutely.
I know they have a partnership, but like Williams has a chance to have, which we're going to talk about.
You call Alpine. You call Alpine and you go, what is it going to take for me to get him? You're buying our engine. One of the requirements of buying our engine is in 2026, he's driving for you.
Like, 25 seat for the guy, though.
You don't put him straight in. Even Red Bull didn't put Verstappen straight into a Red Bull. They knew how good he was.
I think if they could, they would. First. They don't want to have this be a situation where his camp's like, okay, like, sorry, you missed your chance. Like Verstappen once again slips through Toto Wolff's fingers. He just will not have that happen. He's willing to potentially nerf them winning a team title next year because they have a car that right now is starting to look like a race-winning car. Like, I get both sides of it. I know I'm someone who hates normally trying to split the baby on this thing, but like.
And you're very much, you've always in any of our conversations been the guy to defend this move. And
I just get why. I get why it's crazy, but I get why they're like, we cannot let this guy not be with us.
I don't understand how his camp, how Antonelli's camp is like, you have to get us into F1 this year. Like, you were
because they can. He's a fucking big prospect.
You were driving F4 2 years ago. I wouldn't want my guy to do it. I'd be like, yeah, you're like 10th place in F2 this year.
So much money. If you're a manager for a prospect,
try explain like, no, we need to not go to F1.
That is malpractice if you are not seeking the largest possible paycheck.
Yeah, I just don't see.
I don't think he should be in a Mercedes, but I also don't think that he should be stuck in F2. I think the Alpine,
like
or you find a way to
in F2.
But their car hasn't been that great. We're not going to get into F2 talk here. Bill, what's your answer to this question?
So, all right, I think from Sainz's perspective, going to Williams is a step backward. And I mean, this is a move that has happened, so I'm not talking about speculation here with with Antonelli. But for Williams, home run. Fucking knocked it out of the park. Stellar hire. You get a top 5 driver to be in a car. You get, him alongside Albon is going to be a great pairing. I think they're going to have a lot of luck there. I think Sainz is going to bring. Huh?
You're selling me on this move. What's the bad?
No, I'm selling you on this move from Williams' perspective. Sainz is the one that I think. I didn't understand where he was coming from on this. I mean,
I don't think he had a choice.
Sure, he did. He could have gone to Audi. He could have been.
He could have gone to Audi, but
The team with a car right now that is just like laughably bad, that we spent 5 minutes talking about it being laughably
but Audi can
bad.
afford to pay him.
So can Williams.
But it's a 2-year deal.
Sorry, I'll let you make your case.
Yeah,
No,
go ahead.
You're right about the 2-year deal. But I mean, his other choices, he could have gone to Mercedes. He could have gone to Toto and been like, hey, bud, I know that they're going to give Antonelli a hard time about this. Let me do it 1 year, prove it, and we'll see where it goes. But for Sainz, I mean, it just seems, and he waited months. He waited months for the driver market to shake out. He had more seats available to him earlier in the cycle, but he's just kind of sat there and just twittered it away. But I think that he is going to bring Williams some very much needed stability. He's going to bring them some additional sponsorships. He's going to be a better driver than Sargent, so they're going to get more points. They're going to get paid better. He's not going to crash as much. He's going to have, savings from that. I think for Williams, stellar choice. For Sainz, really a head scratcher. Why he didn't move earlier and try and figure something out the moment that Hamilton said, "Hey, I'm going to Ferrari."
I don't think Mercedes wanted him. I think Mercedes was like, if you want to come on a 1-year deal, but he takes all the risk in that. And so I don't think Mercedes even really wanted him. I think it was, he wanted the Red Bull seat. He was hoping Checo got let go, and he was hoping he could get that seat, and Red Bull told him no. And that's why he waited so long.
If Red Bull really wanted to have the best driver in there, that's probably not going to challenge Verstappen, they would have gotten Carlos Sainz. He's good enough to be better than Checo, I think, most weekends, but isn't Max Verstappen level. Has experience driving Red Bull's kind of car from his time as a junior there. That, if Red Bull was making the best move that wouldn't upset their current situation, I think it would have been Sainz, but I don't know if Carlos Sainz sells as many Red Bull cans.
Yep.
All right. Oh, I guess my answer to this question, Fernando Alonso, in terms of why does he want to stick around to be on this team? I get it, it's an F1 drive.
Raikkonen did, man.
You're 44 years old. I don't know, man. Go just do Le Mans and a handful of other events. I get it. He loves doing this and he's still physically capable of doing it, so he wants to keep doing it. But you want to do it in this, this team with this Nepo baby teammate who's just never. I mean, I guess you can always beat him, and that's fun. I love that they make him say nice things about Lance whenever he's trying to be. Oh yeah, that's a very good driver. I don't understand. I don't understand why he wants to be with this team. I get that there's probably not a ton of he's not going to get into a race winning car probably at this point, but I was surprised when he re-signed pretty early in the process here. That's my answer to this one. All right.
I think the reason
we're almost 2 hours, but I'm not trying to cut you off. We were almost 2 hours here. We got to get this last question because it's one I've really wanted to kick around with the three of you, and I will throw it to you first as I've cut you off here from your further thoughts on silly season. Now that Williams has this shockingly good driver pairing, we've talked about Carlos Sainz confirmed just in the last week, Alex Albon returning to the team after three very good seasons, 2.5, I guess, right now with the team. What do you think of the peak of what they could achieve in the next 2 years with these two guys is?
So 2025, I think if everything lines up, they can be sixth in the constructors. And in 26, who knows, man? If they have that Mercedes engine, and they nail the regs, if they just got rid of Excel for everything, these people don't have a real database or anything. They are literally running out of spreadsheets, and it's so big that it takes 10 minutes to recalculate. So if they could get some real management principles behind them, if they could get some real software behind them, and they've got years of technical debt, but Valls is there, he's cleaning that up. Man, 2026, they could be up there with the top teams again where they should be. Williams has the second most championships out of any team in the sport. And man, I think they could be up there again. I think they could hit as high as third or fourth in 2026.
Bobby, what do you think?
Third or fourth?
If the
Yeah,
Mercedes engine is that good, I mean, I don't think I'd predict it, but
third or
like,
fourth though, they're just so far behind the top four. They're
but if
so
that
far
new engine
behind
is that good,
but it's
Yeah.
1 year. Think
no, in 26, I'm saying.
Yeah, but even that, you have one season, and in 2 years from now, we'll be halfway through the 26 season. And the idea that they have passed Ferrari and McLaren, who will also be using that Mercedes engine. McLaren will also be using it. Mercedes will also be using it. And I mean, you look back, if you go back to the past, the customer teams didn't do as well as Mercedes did when Mercedes was still killing it. Right? So you still got to build a car. Williams has always had a Mercedes engine for a very long time, and they were ass with the Mercedes engine when the Mercedes engine was winning. Right? So like they're so far behind. I'm not saying that they're going to continue to be 9th or 10th. I think that they have the potential to be 6th, 5th, somewhere in there where they're competing with Aston or something like that. Aston, who also will have a lot more money and will also be using the Mercedes engine. So it's not that I don't think Williams won't get better. I just see them tapping out 5th, 6th, 7th, something like that. I don't see them being the second best Mercedes engine team on they're so far behind.
They won't be the second best Mercedes engine team. That'll be McLaren. But they're going to be, like I said, 3rd or 4th, right? So it'll be Mercedes, McLaren, Williams, maybe? Maybe there's a Red Bull in 3rd or 4th with them. I mean, it's going to be if the engine is as good as it is, and if they have the step up
Aston
next year.
was using the Mercedes engine. They're not. They have Honda. Sorry.
They will
have Honda because
Yeah, in 26.
But again, if they can keep these management changes going and they have the step change that I'm expecting next year, I think they'll have another step change in 26. They're going to have the additional funding from
I'm looking back at past constructors. You really see when Mercedes was winning 2014, Williams was the 3rd best team.
Yeah.
2015, they were the 3rd best team.
They finally have a driver lineup that can actually conceivably get a car like top 5.
They were 5th. I just feel
they don't have a Latifi. They don't have a Sargent.
I just feel like they're so far behind.
At one point, this team had Lance Stroll as a driver because his dad dumped a bunch of money into it, and Lance Stroll was actually like their best driver. Yeah. I want to say the year he was at Sorokin, I think.
Man, 3rd is just feels so high for Williams right now. You know how Sam said he'll believe a Ferrari when he sees it. I will believe a Williams when I see them in 5th. Right?
Fair. That's fair.
I think you guys have hit a lot of the main point. I'll say I think they'll be when we do this podcast, probably in 2 more years. I think they'll be in the tier above this one. I think they'll be I could see maybe 4th with everything breaks right. I could see like 6th if it's a pretty competitive midfield. But I think they'll be a more respectable team they are right now because that Mercedes engine, because I think they're run by competent, serious people, because they have the one private equity hedge fund, whatever you want to call it, Doralton Capital entity, who actually is investing without just cannibalizing the product they took over. They actually, from everything that's been said, it's hey, they would invest more if they were allowed to. They are only allowed to invest but so much because of F1's I think there's sustainability rules or whatever. They would invest more if they could. James Vowles has said, we need to upgrade the stuff, and Doralton's maxing out what we're allowed to give. So I think they'll get there. I don't think they'll be a top 3 team, but I can see them definitely being the 3rd best Mercedes car when the 26 regulations roll around. All right, guys, that's it. A slim 2 hours of talking about the 2024 F1 season. Fantastic to talk to both of you always, but to do on here this podcast, really great. Let's do it again here in a couple summers, fellas.
Heck yeah.
Let's do it.
Bill, great having you. I would say, Bill, specifically great having you as the guest. Thank you for the graphics. Thank you for the trenchant F1 insights. And to quote the Golden Girls theme song, thank you for being a friend.
Fellas, man, that caught me by surprise. Fellas, I've been
by surprise.
Absolutely, I've loved this. I'm looking forward to being on in a couple of years and talking about the new regs in 2026.
Also enjoy just bullshitting and talking F1 with you guys generally as well. Bobby, what do we always say at the end here?
Go Cougs.
Go Cougs.